Welcome to Mrs. Long's presentation on literary essay structure. Today you'll be learning the proper structure for a correct literary essay. I've named this hashtag the most important English lesson of your life because this is a skill that you'll be using up until the end of matric, and so it's really important that you understand the correct structure at this stage. Why? Well, as I mentioned, at the end of matric you'll be asked to write two literary essays, one for your novel and one for the play. And it's great that you've got all these ideas floating around in your head. The literature essay structure allows you to record those ideas in an articulate way so that you can get the best marks for your ideas possible. Right, we'll start off by looking at the introduction and basic structure of a literary essay. In the next video, you will learn how to approach the question and how to plan your essay. And in the third video, we'll look at some examples of paragraphs and show you how to integrate quotations into your essay. So, when you're thinking about responding to a literary essay question or responding to a text that you've studied, we like to think that you can respond on three levels. Now, in order to illustrate these levels, we're going to be looking at an extract from Purple Hibiscus. The extract is talking about Kambili's relationship with her father and how he gives her a love sip of his tea, as he calls it. However, his tea is always too hot, it burns her tongue. But she says that she doesn't really matter because it burns her father's love into her. Now you can respond to this in three ways. Either on the line, between the line, or beyond the lines. Now if you're looking on the line, it's basically reading what is being said, what is happening in the scene, who's saying what, who's doing what, very basic. If you can read it, you'll be able to see what's happening. Reading between the lines is talking about the attitudes, the motivations, the relationships between your characters, and understanding sort of what isn't being said. Reading beyond the line means that you can understand how the ideas in your text translate outside of that text. In other words, what importance does it have to you as a reader? What do you take away from it in terms of what could you learn or what could you apply in your own lives? So let's look at some examples of how we can look at this text on those three different levels. So if you're reading on the line, you would say, well, it's a text about how Eugene is sharing his tea with Kambili. That's what's happening in this extract. Reading between the lines. Right, so if you're reading between the lines, it means that you are looking at, well, clearly Kambili places a lot of importance on her relationship with her father if she's willing to, take pain because she wants to please him, or she feels like the pain is worth suffering as a result of the burnt tea. Right, reading beyond the line. Now this is where it gets a little bit more complex. If we look at the line, she says, I knew when the tea burned my tongue, it burned Papa's love into me. We can see that clearly Kambili has a problem differentiating between love and pain. And she doesn't understand that it shouldn't burn her tongue, and her father shouldn't actually expect her to drink tea that burns her tongue. This highlights the theme of abuse and helps us to understand that what is happening in the situation is not normal. And that's our third level of response. Okay. Now we go on to the structure of your essay. So you're responding at level 3 because you're all thinking really, really deeply about your reading, but how do you put this into an essay form? Now when I think of an essay, I like to think of it as a hamburger. I like to think that the introduction is the top bun, all the ingredients in the middle are your body paragraphs, and the bottom bun is your conclusion. And now just as you cannot have a complete hamburger without all three of these aspects, you cannot have a complete literary essay if you don't have an introduction, some body paragraphs, and a conclusion. In other words, if you don't have an introduction, your essay will not have much structure. You'll kind of dive into talking about the topics without your reader actually knowing what question you're going to be answering. If you don't have enough body paragraphs or enough meat in your essay, it's going to lack depth and it's going to lack analysis. And of course your conclusion rounds everything off. And just as if you didn't have a bottom bun on a hamburger and everything would fall out all over the place, if you don't have a conclusion on your essay, it feels unfinished and your reader will probably have trouble seeing what the main point of your essay was all about. So now we're going to look a little bit more carefully at each of these elements. Right, obviously in your introduction you're going to try and capture your reader's interest. There's nothing worse than reading essay after essay on the same topic and everyone's taking it in the same way and starting in this essay by blah, 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 blah. Really, you want to try and mix it up by doing something different, and we'll talk a little bit later about how you can do that. Your introduction needs to indicate the direction in which your essay is going to go. In other words, you need to do a certain set of things as listed here, okay, in order for the reader to have a clear idea of what text you're responding to, what is the genre of that text, and so they can understand a little bit of the context, and obviously you're going to answer the question. Now, a lot of people say, why am I answering the question in the introduction? Well, a literary essay is not like a narrative essay. You're not waiting for that big punchline in the conclusion where you're going to, wow your readers with an interesting twist. Really, you're looking to prove your point, and so your thesis statement, your answer to the question, actually needs to be in the introduction. You will then spend the rest of the essay proving that that is in fact true using evidence from the text. Your body paragraphs, and there's no limit to how many you can have in an essay, although obviously you don't want to go on for too long, are really important in showing that you can fluently build an argument. In other words, each paragraph needs to follow logically on from the previous paragraph, and they all need to add value to your essay. If you can remove a paragraph and your essay still makes perfect sense, then obviously it doesn't need to be there. Now, when you're looking at the structure of your paragraphs, I like to think of them as a teepee or a little tent. Okay, you're going to have your topic sentence, which will tell the reader what that paragraph is about. You're going to make a point or one or 2 points, and then you will include examples of how that point is evident in the text, whether it be through referring closely to what happened, or using a quote, or if it's a film essay, referring to some techniques used in that scene. And then you need to end off, it's essential that you end your paragraph off with explaining how that point links to answer the question. And in that way, actually, every paragraph is a mini essay on its own if you think that it needs to have a topic sentence as an introduction and then an explanation as a little conclusion. And in our next video, we'll look at more carefully at how to link these paragraphs together. Your conclusion, obviously, you're bringing together the main points of your essay. You need to make a strong answer to the question to make sure that your reader knows this is where you stand. Please don't just repeat the introduction, and obviously you may not bring in new information. That is a cardinal sin. You cannot mention something at the end, because, I thought it was important to say that. If it was important to say that, you need to cover it in one of your paragraphs. Okay, so do not bring in any new information. But you are obviously going to reiterate the main points in your paragraphs, and then make sure that you've answered the question and that you've brought in your level 3 understanding, so that the reader is clear that you have a very developed understanding of the text and the question itself.